If you're type 1 diabetic and if you Googled how long fat loss should take, every answer online is written for someone without insulin, hypos, or blood sugar swings to deal with daily. So here's the real roadmap, 5 phases, what each one looks like, what it feels like, and what to actually expect as a type 1 diabetic losing fat. So if you don't know, I'm Eoin. I'm a type 1 diabetic myself, and I've coached enough type 1s through fat loss to actually know which roadmap plays out for us. So phase one is weeks 1 to 3, and I call this the data phase. During this phase, this looks like the scale barely moving. It might even tick up a little bit. And here's exactly what it feels like. So a lot of the time it's going to feel confusing, honestly. You're not doing everything right. Nothing seems to be happening. And that's the part that makes most people panic a lot, which is normal. But here's what's actually going on. So sugar pulls water with it. And when your blood sugar swings up and down, water moves up and down too. So a single bad day can shift the scale up or down by a kilo, and none of that is going to be fat. It's just water following your blood sugar around. So you're not failing in phase one. You're just collecting real data, your real trends, your time in your range, where your hidden defensive calories are. And by the end of it, you will have a baseline that you can trust instead of guessing. So phase two, weeks 4 to 8, and I call this the turn because it's usually where the trend finally starts to happen. And here's what it looks like. Slow, steady movement around half a kilo every week. Nothing dramatic, but just real progress starting to happen consistently. And it feels like relief mostly, the first sign that it's actually working. It can also feel a little bit fragile, like one bad week might undo it, but it won't. And here's what you can expect. So losing fat faster than half a kilo every week usually means that you're under eating, which brings the hypo problem straight back. And that costs you training quality. And this also is where most people quit because they're comparing a normal plateau to a timeline that was never built for type 1 diabetics. So they put in the effort, they don't see the fast results, they lose motivation, and then they stop. Then they feel guilty and they try again months later. And that cycle isn't about willpower. It's just about knowing that this roadmap actually existed. Phase three, this typically happens between months 3 and 6, and this is where progress starts to become really visible. So clothes start to fit completely differently. The mirror looks completely different. People might notice, they might be complimenting you, even if you haven't said anything. And it normally feels like the emotional turning point too. So you stop needing daily reassurance because you can actually finally see for yourself that what you're doing is working, and your confidence will start catching up with you when you get these results. And it's not just because someone told you that it's working, it's because you can actually see it and you can feel it for yourself. So one of my clients barely moved on the scale for about 5 weeks. And then between weeks 5 and 10, he dropped about 10 kilos. So he'd gone from 109 kilos down to 96 kilos in about 12 weeks. And if he judged this at week 2, like most people would do, he would have quit before it even started working. So if you do want someone tracking your real trend instead of the scale, the link is below where you can book in a one-to-one call with myself and we can map out the clear steps for you. So phase 4 is roughly months 6 to 9, and I call this the sensitivity shift because you'll likely need a lot less insulin during this phase. And here's why it happens. Things start to become more predictable. And the reason is this phase, typically your insulin sensitivity increases. Things are more predictable, you get fewer swings, training feels steadier because your body's responding better to the work that you're actually putting in. And as you lose the fat and as your training gets more consistent, your insulin sensitivity will improve vastly. And your body does need less insulin to manage the same food for the same session. So less insulin circulating means less of that fat storing signal working against you. And it's a loop that starts working for you instead of against you when we can make this happen. Phase number 5 is typically between months 9 and 12 and beyond, and this is where the goal really shifts. So when we look at it like this, there's less time thinking about the scale and more time thinking about what your body can actually do. Lifting heavier, moving faster, recovering faster. And this is the part that no one's telling you about. So fat loss stops becoming the goal and it actually just becomes the foundation because you're not fighting your body anymore. Now you're building on top of it. So by now you understand your own system well enough to actually run it without me or without your coach standing there over your shoulder. And that is the goal here. Not to have dependency on a coach forever. It's you knowing your own numbers well enough and knowing what to actually do to be able to keep building performance on top of the foundation that you have built. And I want to be honest with you about something because this depends on a few specific things. So how insulin sensitive you are when you start out, how long you have been off track, your training history. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you 6 weeks to make the progress because it isn't true for most people. So don't compare yourself to someone without type 1 or even to another type 1 diabetic, because reality is their numbers are not your numbers. And that comparison is rarely ever helpful. So this really isn't about intensity. It's more about consistency. the kind that actually holds up when your life gets busy. And that compounds into something real over a year. In fact, if you were to get 1% better every day, that would be a 37x return by the end of the year. And that's the bit that no one really talks about. So that's the real roadmap, 5 phases, each one building on the last. It's realistic, but it still needs you to actually run it. But if you do want to know exactly where you sit on it based on your own numbers, that is a conversation worth having. And again, there's a link in the description to book a one-to-one call with myself to show you exactly where you are in this roadmap and what you need to do to get onto your next stage.